You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 92. Today I'll be talking to Femke Hiemstra. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Femke Hiemstra. Femke creates beautiful paintings that are incredibly reminiscent of old storybooks or fables that may or may not have something to do with the fact that she went to school for illustration and started her career as a freelance illustrator. We talk about her early years as an illustrator in our conversation, as well as how she made the transition from that to focusing exclusively on her personal art. We also talk about how she makes the super unique panels that many of her works are on, what she's been up to lately, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Femke Hiemstra. Femke, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for asking me. It's a pleasure.
All right. And shout out to Jolene Lai, who I had on for episode 81. She was the one who mentioned you as the artist that she'd most like to see me have on the show when I asked.
Yeah, that was a surprise to hear. Very nice that you did.
So let's dive into your background a little bit. And I know that you were born and grew up in Zaanstad, which I believe is close to Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
Yes.
What was that area like when you were growing up? Was it more rural or was it like suburban?
Suburban. We moved around a couple of times, but mostly to suburban places. It's pretty close to Amsterdam. It's only 15 minutes by train.
Okay.
You can ride it in your car 20 minutes, under an hour by bicycle. So
did you spend a lot of time in Amsterdam growing up because you were so close?
No. I stuck to my surroundings pretty much. I only went to Amsterdam when I needed to go, well, for shopping, or later on when I went to School of Graphic Arts, but other than that, no, I stuck to where I lived.
Okay. And so even though it wasn't rural and you weren't really super close to rural areas, did you like to spend much time in nature growing up?
When I grew up, we had a whole bunch of pets. We also had a dog, and I took the dog for long walks in the surroundings, and there were some fields nearby. And I spent much time there. I was a creative kid as well, so I also spent a lot of time indoors, just drawing, just painting, stuff like that.
And what kind of work did your parents do? Anything artistic?
Not at all. My dad, he worked for the city of Zaanstad. He started with making technical drawings, drawing building plans for new suburban areas. The areas that we lived in were very much in development. Later on, he took more of a management role, but still for the city of Zaanstad. And my mom, she was a teacher at a primary school.
Okay.
And she did that her whole life. They're both retired now, and they have a photography hobby, both of them.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Yeah, that's so pretty cool. So you could say that now that they're retired, that they go out and be more creative with a camera.
Maybe they got that creativity from you. I mean, maybe you paid it back.
Well, maybe. Who knows? Yeah.
So when you were growing up, did you have much exposure to the arts? Even though they themselves weren't artistic, did they foster that kind of creative environment for you?
Not really, no. We weren't a family that went to museums very often. I can probably count them on both of my hands. I was a very curious kid, though. I was gifted a lot of books, as presents when it was my birthday, and that whole creative drive was very much inside of me. So I was always tinkering about making stuff, but it wasn't that my parents really took on a leading role in that. They just they were very supportive, but it's not that they took me to many places, took me to many museums or galleries, or no.
Okay. And then, I guess without that, what do you think sparked your interest in art and creation?
Well, my grandfather, he was very much a maker, as we would say today. He was also a teacher, but in his spare time, he just loved to create things. It could be all sorts of things. He made his own instruments, music instruments.
Oh, wow.
It was all very much, how do you say that, makeshift? Yeah, but still, he could really dive into a project. And he also took on, he taught himself how to paint. And he would, besides my parents, he probably was my biggest supporter. And he was always interested in what I was doing. Yeah, but other than that, I think that like I said, the drive was very much already inside of me. And but maker-wise, maybe my grandfather and me were a bit of the birds of the same feather.
Yeah, that's very cool. I guess, as you were growing up, when people asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Did you already know at that point that you wanted to be an artist, or were you wanting to be other things?
A forest ranger.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Or then a veterinarian, or something other with animals, something with horses. Yeah, very much in the animal corner, nature corner. But yeah.
How did that change then? I guess, how did you pivot from wanting to go into, veterinary medicine or park ranger to focusing more seriously on your art?
Once I learned that a vet also had to operate on animals, that whole idea of being a veterinarian quickly vanished. And
you mean I don't just get to pet animals all day?
No. I don't get to brush them.
Right.
No, but that was pretty much a child's mindset still. So there wasn't much thought behind it. It was just I just want to be with animals all day.
Right, right.
Well, that was the first logical thing I could think of. But besides being very fond of animals and nature, I was also very fond of drawing and painting. So I don't know. It was a choice I've made, and maybe more career options with being creative.
Very cool. And so, when it came time to go to school, I know that you went to 2 different art schools. Initially, you went to the Graphisch Lyceum in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Why there specifically? What attracted you to that school?
That was, it was a practical reason. On one side, it was very close by. It was just a short distance from my house, so I could stay at home and go to school, just take the train, take the tram, and then under an hour I would be at school. And also it was very, the whole education was very practice-based. It was very broad. So I don't know, I felt art school was a bit too serious. And with this, I felt that I could just learn a little bit of everything. from screen printing to making technical drawings, visualizing, still with markers and pencils, nothing digital, to photography, to all sorts of things. It was just a big blend of creative skills. And after 4 years, I felt like I wasn't ready to go and work. And I got the opportunity to, or my parents provided the opportunity to go to art school. So that's what I did next. I just wanted to, see what's more to discover. And that's why I did two educations, so to say.
Yeah, and so like the second school that you went to was the School of Arts in Utrecht.
Yes.
Both of those experiences you focused on illustration. So like what was your career goal at that point? What were you hoping to do with degree in illustration?
Well, surprisingly, to be an illustrator. I very much like the boundaries that illustration gave me. I felt that making autonomic arts, is that how you say it? Or making personal pieces, what was just, I don't know what to do. It just felt like swimming in an ocean with no direction, and illustration was like swimming in a swimming pool. I had some boundaries, and within those boundaries there were a few rules that I had to take in account. And with that, I had to make something. And those, it's a bit more problem solving. And I really like that. And the other thing just felt too broad. I could not oversee it. And with illustration, I felt that it was, overseeable.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And between those two experiences, between the two schools that you went to, did the programs differ very much? Like, was there a noticeable difference in the way that those programs approached teaching you illustration?
Oh, yes, very much so. When I went to the school in Amsterdam, I started there when I was 16, and that education, or those years, that took 4 years, and it was very much a helping school. So they very much were teaching you, this is how we want you to do things, and the creative freedom that you had was more limited compared to what I learned in art school. And art school was just like, okay, this is the street we want you to walk into, but go and see what you can find. There's the assignment. This is what we want you to do. But what you are doing with that, what you like to do with the assignment, that's totally up to you. And so that was much more open, much more freedom, of a less school-like, so to say.
Okay. And you mentioned that they you had the opportunity to explore different types of art making, from screen printing and obviously graphic design. Did you have the ability to explore the fine art side of art as well? Painting and drawing, and some of the, you mentioned that you like the boundaries that illustration provides you, but did you at least have some exposure to those other types of art programs?
During that time, that I was 20 when I started art school, and I followed that course for 3 years. I skipped a year because after 1 year, I felt I wasn't learning enough. So I made up my own assignments. I felt I needed more challenge. And after they gave me the opportunity to skip a year, which gave me more to chew on, so to say. I don't know, because maybe the drive that I mentioned before, it was still there. So I taught myself a whole lot. I don't think that art school really taught me much in that department. It was more like shaping. They did teach me a whole lot about concept creating and making stories. We didn't have teachers. There were mostly people from, they were illustrators, just doing a teaching job. And I think skill-wise, I already had some in my backpack, so to say. perhaps on something that I learned on my previous on the previous education.
So, like, looking back, how do you feel about overall your time at school? Do you feel that it was a valuable use of your time and that you got out of it what you wanted to get out of it? Or I guess what would you recommend others doing that might be considering going to art school?
I was still very young in my head. I didn't have much life experience. It's not that I grew up sheltered or anything, but I don't know. I was still very green and childish, perhaps. Not. I don't know. It gave me a little bit more life experience, meeting other creatives, seeing how other people do what they do. Yeah, going out a little bit more. I tend to be a bit of a recluse, so maybe that helped. But to give somebody else, I think to give advice to somebody else, I think it very much depends on personality type you have. I don't know. It depends from person to person, I think, but it's not like one general from, oh, you must go to art school, because that would really help.
Sure. So after graduating, did you stick around Utrecht, or did you go back towards Amsterdam?
I went back to first to live with my parents for just a couple of months, and then I found a place to live in Amsterdam, and went to go and live there. Okay.
And what kind of work were you doing initially? I believe that you spent a period of time doing freelance illustration work. Was that what your job was right out of college?
Yes.
Okay.
Made a little like a postcard portfolio kind of thing that I mailed around. I wanted to say emailed around, but that's not. It was it was actually made from paper, real paper, in the post. I sent it over to a couple of addresses, to a couple of art directors that I knew from, like I said, the teachers at art school were illustrators. Some people said, "Oh well, this is a place where you can try to get an appointment to show your portfolio and see if they like your work and they want to work with you." So anyway, I did that, and I sent out a bunch of those mini portfolios, and that worked pretty well. And so within a couple of months, I already had a few clients, and that really took off. And soon I didn't know any better than working hard and working many hours a day was the norm. So I continued to do that for quite some time, I believe. 9 years in total.
Okay.
With ups and downs, but yeah.
What were the nature of the projects that you were doing? Was it for publication? Was it for marketing? Was like, what side of illustration were you mostly in?
Mostly editorial stuff.
Okay.
And for some reason or another, quite a lot of sponsored magazines. So that's not illustration work that everybody can see. It's for companies mostly.
Oh, okay.
They paid pretty well, but it was 9 out of 10 times pretty boring to do.
But you won several awards, from what I understand, for your illustration work, including Illustration of the Year from the Association of Dutch Designers.
Yeah.
So pretty well accomplished in your field. Did you enjoy, even though some of that was kind of boring? Did you like the I guess problems that you mentioned earlier, liking problem solving? Did you really enjoy that kind of work while you were doing it?
Yeah. I wasn't bored of it. There were enough surprises along the way, because you have to do some assignments that are boring. That's just for paying the rent, and every now and then you had some very fun job to do, which was challenging both in concept and challenging both in what it was I don't know, just interesting assignments. And one of those assignments, did won me some awards. Yes.
Nice. And if I understand correctly, in the early part of your illustration career, you were actually making painted illustrations using like traditional mediums, and then eventually transitioned to using like Photoshop. Tell me about that. Like, how did that evolution take place, and what was it like doing these illustrations using, traditional mediums?
Well, it was around. There was a certain time where there was a switch. People started to use Photoshop much more. I saw all these colleagues around me using Photoshop, and I felt that I needed to do that too. I just didn't want to stay behind, and I liked the challenge. I just dove in, and I made some horrible illustrations around the time, just trying to find my voice, my digital voice.
Nice. Yeah. While you were working on these freelance projects, were you able to also start developing your personal art practice on the side? Like, how did you balance those two things?
No, that's more or less dropped into my lap, the whole making personal pieces. It was around 2006, 2007, and the recession started to become more clear, become more apparent. And I lost a couple of my illustration clients, and I got this invitation from a gallery in New York to show there at their place. And I didn't know anything about showing art. I didn't know anything about galleries. I only read the email, New York. So in a very opportunistic way, I just thought, well, why the hell not? I just do it. I picked out a couple of illustrations that weren't too much illustration-like. They had a bit of a personal piece feel. And they were prints. I was making digital art back then, Photoshop work. And I sent that in, and it's sold.
Nice.
To my surprise. But that was the start, of my so-called art career. The gallery, it was the MF Gallery, which stands for Martina and Frank. And they were showing dark art mostly. And I didn't even notice that my work was, well, I did notice a little bit that my work was different compared to the other stuff that they were showing. But they kept asking me back to join in more exhibitions. And at a certain point, I decided to really make something, especially for the exhibition, because I was running out of prints. I was running out of illustration work that I could present as personal pieces. So I more or less needed to. And that's when I got noticed by Kirsten Anderson.
Nice.
From Rock LaRue. From that point on, it really took a flight into the direction of art. And at that point, I didn't have any illustration assignments at all.
So it was like perfect timing then. I mean, so it sounded like, some of the illustration work was dying off a little bit because of the recession. And at the same time, you got this out of the blue invitation to show in New York. And that led to you meeting Kirsten and Kirsten finding out about you. And then obviously that's been a long-standing relationship that you've maintained throughout the course of your career. Incredible. And so I guess that's kind of what gave you the confidence in 2006, 2007 to just focus entirely on your personal practice? Yeah,
that's exactly how it went. Yeah. At one point, every now and then, I got a request to do an illustration assignment, but I had to cancel it because after I did my first shared show at Rock LaRue, that went pretty well for the newbie that I was. I was a completely new name, some person from the other side of the ocean with a a name that can't be pronounced. I was a new face, but she took that chance, and it went really well. My over there, my work sold as well. So
Nice.
That was really a like a good start.
Yeah. It's amazing. And so this is sort of, relatively early in the days of pop surrealism movement, which obviously Rock LaRue and Kirsten played a big part in helping to elevate. I guess, how do you feel that your work relates to, I guess, that movement specifically, but then also, like, do you feel a kinship to the founders of, that movement, like Mark Rydens and the Camille Rose Garcias and, your peers effectively?
I'm not sure I knew of their work. It's not that common it's not that common in the Netherlands. Every now and then I find a Juxtapose magazine in a shop somewhere. But other than that, I just followed the beat of my own drum.
No, it's amazing that the kind of across the globe, there's kind of a coalescing of ideas that were very similar, even though they're so spread out. I think that's a kind of an interesting thing to inspect a little bit. But I think that's a good kind of segue in talking a little bit more about your art specifically and the style of your work. And there's definitely a very kind of storybook aesthetic, which I think is a consistent characteristic of a lot of your contemporaries as well in the pop surrealist movement. And so, like, do you take inspiration from like old storybooks or fables, or like how do you feel that your art relates to that fable aesthetic?
I don't read fables. I just read crime stories mostly.
Okay.
I listen to the news. I listen to podcasts. I talk to people. So in a way, text and stories are at the base of what I create, but it's not necessarily that I go and read storybooks or read fairy tales from, I don't know, some foreign country or my own country. But no, it's text based, it's story based, but not in that way. No.
Okay. Is there a narrative element to it? Like, are you trying to tell a story through your work?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it's just a word. Sometimes it's somebody's nickname that inspires me to create a whole story around it, but not like in a way that my work needs a whole text to be explained. These past couple of years, I tend to make series of work around one theme, and before that, I did not do that. They were all separate stories, all separate inspirations, so to say, or sources of inspiration.
You said one thing just now that I think was super interesting, which is you used to have your pieces had these kind of self-contained stories, and then now you've more focused on a story that crosses their boundaries and I guess unifies them across a body of work. I guess what led to that shift? What motivated that change?
I think at a certain point, I saw some. I often see cross references. Somebody tells me something. It could be a story or in the news, or just something that happened to a friend, or and then I start to see similar lines that connects to something else. And so, for example, a few years back, I did a whole series of work around the theme of work, because when I was talking about work with a friend of mine, I suddenly envisioned all these images that had this theme of work in common, and it's like, coming up with the concept of a book, and all of a sudden you see all these little chapters, and they're different, but the common theme is this one thing, and it was really inspiring. And that opened up my mind a little bit. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have to make a new story for every new work that I create, although I've been doing that for years. And I still do. I do for just separate pieces. For a piece for a piece for a group show, for example, that's just a standalone concept. But if I have to make more, then I like to use one theme and just take it from there.
So when you're doing that larger body of work that's unified by this central theme, do you generally create that theme up front and then build all of the work around that? Or do you just start working until you see some theme develop across multiple pieces?
No, the first.
Okay.
Yeah. And occasionally it's, I come up with something new while I'm working. But usually it's divided into separate blocks of time. There's the idea moment and there's the creation moment, and I see that as two different brainwaves. Yeah.
Interesting. One very consistent element of your work is the focus on animals, and so I'm kind of curious, like, what place do animals play in your stories? Are they are they just characters in a story about humanity, or are you telling stories about these animals specifically? Like, what role do the animals play?
Well, they're in a way playing a bit of a role. They're more like humans, but then in animal form. They just like that's why I can see why people get the connection to fables or fairy tales or other classic ways of storytelling. My animals behave most of the time like humans. It's about us, really, but then disguised as animals. It gives me a good excuse to paint them, make nice fur, and and also to play a bit with animal characteristics or animal postures. I place animals on their hind legs a lot, which takes some tweaking of the animal form because, well, 9 of 10 times they're shaped differently. But I don't know, a bit like the French illustrator J.J. Granville. He does it a lot too with animals on their hind legs, and that really, like an atmosphere like that really appeals to me. Yeah, I find it really attractive.
And do the animals, like your choice of which animals to use for a particular character, does that relate back to some characteristic about that character, like their personality or their nature? You know, like wolves you have a certain connotation, or lambs have a certain connotation, and so that actually is part of the story that you're telling?
That's interesting that you're mentioning wolves, because I have a wolf-centered theme coming up in the future.
Oh, nice.
I have to be strict towards myself sometimes to not do a cat again. Because I don't know, they embody so much for me. Dogs as well, by the way. It's because they're so close to us. They're in our direct environment. They're everywhere, and But other than that, no, I try to go by feel. Sometimes it's just an idea pops into my head, like a more or less ready-to-use form, and I just know that this piece just has to be a tiger, or has to be I don't know. I didn't do much fish, but anyway, it could be a fish as well. Yeah.
Okay. And what about just like recurring symbols? Are there symbols that you reuse over and over again throughout the course of your career to mean certain things?
Mostly to amuse myself. I let them smoke quite a lot.
Okay.
Pipes, cigarettes. I like to use text. I love typography.
What about typography specifically? What is it about the written word and letter forms that you like so much to have incorporated into your work for so many years?
I don't know, just the shape. sometimes it just feels like right to have like a straight shape into in a work. Of course, typography can be all sorts of stuff. Can be a script as well. But I don't know. Sometimes it adds something shape-wise. It's not. I don't follow any rules. I just go by feel with that.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that your kind of creative process, you think of it as having two different stages. One is the idea stage and one is the kind of creation stage. How do you generally approach or arriving at ideas for new works? Do you have like dedicated brainstorming activities where you develop ideas, or like a daily sketch routine, anything like that?
Oh, that's nice. That sounds nice. I see that sometimes passing by on social media, like these artists that they do like this for a month, or some can even do it every day. Like they start the day off with a sketching session, and that looks amazing. But no. I don't do that. No. It's more like it comes and goes with. It's like a tidal motion, really. Yeah, I have periods of inspiration, and that could be something can ignite that. I don't know what ignites that. Sometimes it's a book, it's a word somebody says, or something I see on television, or a conversation I have with somebody. It can be anything, really. Yeah.
And how do you generally capture those ideas? Do you just sketch them all down in a notebook, or thumbnail them, or like how do you capture them so you keep them?
Well, it's one benefit of having a Swiss cheese brain. When I was a student, I had this loose leaf system. I made sketches and ideas on all these different pieces of paper, and it was always a mess. And I got to art school, and then I noticed that I forgot almost everything, or brought the wrong stuff, or whatever. So then I decided to use sketchbooks, or dummies, as we also call them. And I have been using them ever since. So I have, I think, 2 books from my art school time. And from then on, I just use sketchbooks. And it's fun. It's a bit like a diary, but I wish I was one of those artists that could use my sketchbook every day to make a little drawing for starters, but no. Maybe one day.
Whenever inspiration strikes. That's cool.
Yeah.
So like once you have a solid idea for a piece and you have it captured in your sketchbook and you're starting to develop that idea further, how do you start building out that composition? Do you do like more and more refined drawings and sketches, or do you just jump right into painting?
I make little thumbnail sketches. They're really tiny, just a couple of centimeters big, just a couple to see what composition works best. Also to check myself, to not repeat myself, because sometimes you have a favorite composition or a favorite theme or whatever. Also, that's why those sketchbooks are a great reference. So I can just flip back a couple of pages or flip back a couple of books. Like, oh, this really looks like something I did before. And if I want to do that kind of atmosphere, maybe I should change it up. So it's fresh and it's new. And so yeah, I start really small, and then I enlarge it digitally in Photoshop. It's just for speed, really. It takes too much time to do it by hand. It's just faster to do it in Photoshop.
And then at that point, you switch over to panel or whatever your final painting is going to be on, and start painting it from there.
Yeah, okay. I print it out, and then I trace it onto the panel or onto the paper. Yeah.
Okay. And so at the point where you start on the final painting, is everything pretty locked down and like figured out at that point, or do you still have room to evolve it even further as you paint?
Also depends on the work. It's how I envision it on forehand. Sometimes it's really clear that this whole piece needs to be in red tones or something like that. And sometimes I make little color thumbnail sketches to make sure that it's balanced. But that's something that goes along the way also. If I decide red is not working after all, then I would glaze a different color over it and take it to a different direction.
Okay. And one really notable thing about your works over the years, and especially in the last few years, have been your use of these really unique panel shapes, ones that conform to the contours of like the subjects many times. So how did that become part of your practice? Because I know in the early days you were using found objects and books and stuff like that you were painting on, but then you started incorporating these really unique like custom panels. So like how did that become a regular part of your practice?
That was also an idea that I came up with because I really like, how do you call it? That's those little scrapbook images that over here in the Netherlands we use that to adorn pieces of poetry. So you can buy all these poesieplaatjes, poëzieplaatjes, that's how we call it. And they were just these neat little cutouts. And I thought that it would look nice to do that, but then with a panel. So I bought myself a electric saw and just I just gave it a go. Yeah.
So you taught yourself woodwork? So you fashioned these panels all yourself?
Yeah. Those cutouts, I did myself. Yeah.
Wow. Because of the fact that the panels are shaped so specifically to the painting, does it mean you have to have your composition like super locked down in order to create those panels in advance, or do you cut the panels after you've done the painting?
No, it's on. I have to prepare the panels on forehand. That sketching need to be, those sketches need to be very precise. If something doesn't work after all, then I can add something to it.
Okay. Have you ever changed your mind about the organization of a piece after you've already made the panel and have to like start over?
Yeah, but then I rather start over. I give myself a few moments to fail, so to say, or to make a mistake, because it can happen. Sometimes something works really well on paper, or something can work really well as a tiny sketch. But then after I made it, it's like, oh no, it doesn't work at all. It's too heavy, or it attracts too much attention, or it attracts the wrong kind of attention. This was a thing that should be in the background and not come to the front as much. And so I try a couple of things to make it better. But after a few tries, if it still doesn't work after a few tries, then I'd rather just start over and completely switch it around. That works better. Otherwise, I lose motivation and you keep on struggling. And no, I just rather kill that darling and start over. Yeah.
Smart. So, primarily you work in acrylic. Are there other mediums that you'd like to explore someday that you may not have had the opportunity to?
Oh, yeah, so many. I never allow myself the time to really dive into it. There's this little devil on my shoulder that says, you should try oils. But still haven't really done that. No, I bought oils at some point, but no. Graphite. I love to work with graphite as well, with pencil work. No. There are some pretty neat, like graphic techniques, like screen printing or etching. There's so many cool things to do.
Yeah. I read in an interview that you did last year that you'd been working here and there as like a side project on ceramic tile. Is that something you're still doing? Like, tell me about that. What's that about?
Yeah, it's more or less good to go. I just need to go. Yeah, I made this. I made my own tile shape, and yeah, it's fun to do. It just takes a lot of time because with glazing, at least the technique that I use, I'm not sure. Maybe it depends on what type of glazing you use. I'm not a ceramic professional at all, but for the project I had in mind, I wanted to use the type of glaze that you have to put on a couple of times in order to make the color just right. So it takes a lot of time, and that's usually my biggest enemy, time. I should schedule that in. Yeah.
Right
But
on.
it's in the freezer. It's still there. It's not at this moment. No.
Okay. And so switching gears a bit, and before we dive into what you've been up to lately, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about your last solo show. I believe it was in 2022, titled "Hardly My Fault." It was your first show in the U.S. since 2016, I guess, at Rock LaRue. The show explored themes revolving around the pursuit of love and how often, we're so helpless in controlling that. So, in addition to having, these super unique panels that we were just talking about, a lot of the pieces featured like pedestals. They were atop like titled pedestals, which I thought was really interesting. And there were several pieces in that show that had that kind of motif. Is there a story behind that motif? Like what was that intended to communicate in the larger context of the story for that show?
There's not a real thought behind that. It's just what I created at the time. No, didn't have a real concept. The concept was more evolving around the theme of it's not my fault. I just put the fault on somebody else, on Cupid or on love or whatever was responsible for that. But that,
Right on. There was a couple of pieces, Naysayer and Yaysayer, I'm thinking of as examples, that had cutouts in the interior of the pieces. So not even just the contours, but there was actually cutouts inside, which I was like, how does that even work? Is like, we talked earlier about your ability to kind of fashion those panels using the machinery that you have. But with them being on the interior of the pieces, it seems like you would have to have even more of the painting figured out than just the rough, outlines. Tell me about that. Did that process differ from how you normally work because you had all of these more complex cutouts?
Those two were the most complex I did with those cutout panels. They took a lot of time to create. It gave me some headaches. Yeah, the whole process wasn't any different than the other work I did, but sometimes I had to add a little thing. Sometimes I had to take off a little thing. I have a handsaw as well, so I just made a hole in the wood and then put the handsaw in there and just created a new hole or created a new detail or
Wow.
Yeah.
That's super labor intensive. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So were those like the most challenging pieces in the show for you, or were there other ones that challenged you as well?
No, those were two. They're in the top 3. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about what you have coming up. What has been your main focus lately, and what does the rest of 2024 look like for you?
I'm working on a new print that will appear in my web shop shortly. I am working on a postcard set. I have a few separate pieces or standalone pieces, so to say, for upcoming group exhibitions. Rock LaRue being one of them. Later in the year, at the end of the year in Hamburg, Feinkunst Krüger. That's a place where I show regularly as well. I'll have to start making work for a shared show I have at Feinkunst Krüger, also in Hamburg. But that's next year spring. Rock LaRue has made a very neat print of one of my cutout works that will be available somewhere this month or at the beginning of next month, but also shortly, somewhere in the upcoming weeks. So yeah, enough to do.
Awesome. Yeah, quite a bit coming up. So I guess where can people follow you and all of these great things you got going on?
They can find me on Instagram and there. And Threads, I made an account there, but it's more like a complaining about Instagram place.
Yet it's owned by the same company.
yeah. I'm not sure how to feel about that.
Right.
I don't know. It's for this moment in time. It's Instagram. There's a new one as well.
Kara, I think is yeah. I haven't checked it out yet, but I see like a post every day about some artist that has just moved to the Kara platform.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just sitting back and watching what's going on there for a bit, and then I'll decide.
Same. I feel a little worn out. I mean, there's so many different platforms, and when they have, I mean, trust me, I am not a fan of Instagram either. But like, it seems like there's been several times where a new app has come along and it's like, this is the next Instagram. And then everybody goes over to it and then it just kind of dies. And so like, I want to just wait and see how it works. I would love to get off of Instagram, but I don't want to be the first one. Like I'll let others pioneer that road for me.
Yeah. Also, just that new one, the Sira of Sita, it feels more like a portfolio site at this moment in time. And what I do like about Instagram, although I have a lot to complain, I just probably like everybody else, the same things that others also complain about. Sometimes the algorithm brings me nice stuff. As in new artists. Like I said, I tend to be a bit of a recluse and not be on top of what's happening in the world or in the art world. And Instagram sometimes serves me something very interesting, new type of work or pages from makers. People who are really into doing just one thing only. I follow this woman who makes very intricate, like pleated corn.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's not something that I would like to have in my house per se, but I don't know, that the whole thing of making that and all how it's shaped and how she creates something from almost like a thrown away product, so to say. I'm not saying that it's completely worthless, but she sees value in it, and of course it's something that stays around. It doesn't die, or it doesn't you call it disintegrate. So she makes something out of it, and I don't know, there's something about the repetitive patterns of something that's folded in a certain way that I think, oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Could maybe be, I don't know, a concept or a series, or I could benefit from it.
Very cool. And I mean, you may not have ever seen it otherwise.
So. No, exactly. So it's a bit of a two-faced thing, the whole Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, very conflicting. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Okay, I've been thinking about this. I heard you ask the same question to fellow interviewees. I have two names. One is probably wishful thinking, but I'll just go ahead and ask. Or, give it to the universe. Who knows? Thomas Woodruff, illustrator, artist. I've been admiring his work ever since art school. He recently did a wonderful show that was completely dinosaur themed.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you've seen it. It's at the Vito Schnabel Gallery. I believe it was in New York. And he made some enormous canvases, or I don't know even if it was on canvas. I believe it was on canvas. Anyway, they're big, they're colorful, they're full of detail. And I'm just very curious how he manages this whole, the composition. You know, how do you do that? A piece that big, I'm very curious to know. And also I would love to hear him talk and just tell other things. And Caroline Smit. She is a Dutch ceramist. She lives in Belgium, if I'm correct. She makes quite big, also some smaller works, but usually it's quite big. It's a bit dark themed work. There's a lot of nature in it. There's also some suffering in it. There's some heavy emotions in it, and it does something to me. I'm very curious to know how how nervous she gets every time she puts her work into a kiln or oven.
Yeah,
because that will be nerve-wracking. You know, you made this whole piece, and then you have to warm it up, and then you just have to hope that it's still in one piece the moment that kiln opens. I would love to know that, and how she comes up with her stories, and I know, give a little insight of her working day, and
awesome,
how she does things.
Very cool. Great suggestions. I appreciate it. And Femke, thank you so much for coming out and chatting with me today. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for asking me. It was a pleasure.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Femke. It was interesting to hear how she transitioned from creating independent, self-contained stories, where each piece was completely on its own, to creating larger, broader themes that spanned several pieces and encompassed an entire body of work. It almost seemed like that was the natural progression of her storytelling abilities. It sounds like Femke has a lot coming up in the next year or so. Be sure to follow her on Instagram to keep up with all of it. So thanks again to Femke for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.